Hi, it's Mark Sinkowitz, and welcome to a special series of Seed World podcast episodes. We'll be covering this year's virtual annual meeting of the National Association of Plant Breeders, which takes place August 15th to 19th, 2021. Dave Bubeck is Research Director Plant Breeding at Corteva Agriscience. He's also president of the National Association of Plant Breeders, or NAPB. I sat down with him to discuss this year's annual meeting, what to expect, and why and how you should register. Enjoy our chat.
Thanks, Mark, for having me. I was really looking forward to having this conversation.
Me too. Well, before we get started, can you just give us the quick 411 on yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Dave Bubeck. I'm a research director at Corteva Agriscience. And the reason for our discussion today, I'm also the current president of the National Association of Plant Breeders. And we have our meeting coming up, our annual meeting in 17 days from now and middle of August. And so we're looking forward to that. And we can talk about that a little bit later.
Before we do chat about the meeting, I just wanted to go over the last 12 months or so of your term as president. What was your favorite part about it, and what was one or two of your accomplishments?
Yeah. Well, maybe just a quick comment on disappointment. The disappointment, of course, was not to be able to see people in person. And so COVID, our limitations due to the pandemic have existed my entire time as president and the entire course of the year. And so in 2020, we had our first annual meeting was a virtual meeting, and we're going to conduct our 2021 meeting in the same manner. So I will have received the gavel, ceremoniously over a virtual Zoom call, and I'll pass it on over a virtual Zoom call. So that maybe is the biggest disappointment for me personally, because I really enjoy the one-on-one interactions and all the networking that we can do through NAPB as a very specific society centered around plant breeding. So that's kind of a disappointment, but we survived it. I would say we actually thrived, I would say, to an extent during this. We figured out a way to alter our meeting last year, our annual meeting, to a virtual experience, and I think it went relatively well as virtual experiences as well as they can go. And we continued with our networking with one another, both among professionals and career professionals, as well as with graduate students and graduate student networking to full-time professionals in their career path on plant breeding. So that all went very well, I think, in spite of the virtual environment. We also, as we embarked on conducting our first annual meeting virtually last year, we also realized that in the coming months, we really needed to step up our game on doing webinars, and really largely with a focus of reaching graduate students in plant breeding and helping them along on the beginning of their career paths, but also as providing a service and connectivity point for our members, and just being able to connect more often on topics that are relevant of the day, sustainability in agriculture, what does the future look like? What are the future job opportunities for students? We had numerous connect points with our 2020 class of Borlaug scholars. So that went very well, I think. The scholars, though, I was a mentor for one of the scholars from last year, and in spite of that experience, we still connected really well, helping along with career discussions and helping her along on a career path. And so I've heard good things about those mentor and mentee relationships, and they've gone relatively well. Could always be better if we could meet and be in person, but we've gone ahead in spite of it. The other thing I would say is a good accomplishment on really thinking about what we need to do to advocate for policy influence, and how do we need to be more bold and more proactive with what we need to do within the advocacy committee within NAPB to really drive technology acceptance for the future. We're at the forefront of science and technologies changing so rapidly driving us into a post-genomic era where we can really look at how can we be more effective at leveraging genomic information to improve cultivars and hybrids and inbreds, and so we have an opportunity to come together as a society to share information and share science back and forth on how we do that. So that, I think, is another thing, getting really crisp and focused, because we as a society haven't been able to send members to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of policy or to interact with policymakers in the USDA, BRS, the EPA, or the FDA. And so we've been really constrained by what we can do. But one of the things we're planning, and is actually on the schedule for early September, is we were going to have 2 sessions of a plant breeding workshop that will be conducted for policymakers in Washington, D.C. They will be virtual workshops, but it's think of it as like a plant breeding 301, not 101, a little more complicated, a little more in depth for policymakers that don't necessarily have, most of them don't have any plant breeding background. They may have some plant biology background, plant science, but they don't have specific plant breeding background. And we're trying to do a session there to not only train them on plant breeding, but the pathway of commercial product development, and then also kind of a starting training on what things would we want to do with CRISPR and genome editing technology to really get down to the genomic level of cultivar improvement. And so those will be coming up in September. So all of that activity emerged right in the midst of COVID, where we couldn't be face to face, but we found alternative paths to connect with not only other members in our society, but also those policy influencers in Washington, D.C.
Now, this year's meeting is being hosted by your organizing committee at Cornell University in New York State. You have a very diverse membership from across the United States and a small Canadian membership as well. For you personally, Dave, what makes you want to be involved with NAPB? What value do you find in it?
The very mission statement of NAPB is that the National Association of Plant Breeders strengthens plant breeding to promote food security, quality of life, and a sustainable future. And that's a very inspiring mission statement to me. And we do that across all species. So fruit trees, nut trees, trees in general, field crops, row crops, vegetables, horticultural species, fruits, and all of those groups come together to really, share stories, share science, share technology opportunities. We share many of the common problems of disease resistance, for example. Almost any species, food, feed, fiber, and fuel. All of these suffer from some aspect of disease pressure. And so there are many common solutions that can be approached across all the different species that come together. And NAPB is really the only society that has that as a full umbrella underneath within NAPB. So that's kind of the second reason, is just the opportunity to bring all those crops together and have that common experience of how do we best apply technology and science to resolve the problems and challenges we face in driving a sustainable food production.
Well, and that brings us to this year's upcoming meeting, August 15 to 19, 2021. As you mentioned, this will be your second virtual annual meeting. What are some of the highlights this year? What are you most excited about?
We have a stellar cast of speakers, the best in both the public sector and the private sector. We kick off the meeting actually on Sunday with a group of students, and that is really, we've done this for several years now, and that's really an opportunity for a professional development workshop for the graduate students primarily, but undergraduates as well are welcome to attend. That is sponsored by Corteva and Bayer, and that will kick off the Sunday of the meeting. And then on Monday kicks off the plenary session that is open to all registrants. And we kick it off with a really a key topic of high throughput phenotyping. Our very next session after that, our second session, is around CRISPR and how do we do genome editing in crops, specifically with a focus on climate change and sustainability. The second day, we will start off by highlighting horticultural plant breeding and really give the stage to some of the horticultural side of fruits and vegetables. And then that afternoon, we have a session on an innovation lab for crop improvement. And then the next day, we kick off with genomic selection. And, plant breeding has really evolved from, field-based selection to whole genome prediction and using genomic prediction systems and using molecular markers and DNA-based knowledge to predict what a given genotype and how a given genotype will perform. So I expect every year we're going to have some updates on a genomic selection system. And that's an ongoing evolving technology and application to plant breeding, and more that will be coming on that. And then that afternoon, diversity and inclusion is a topic that is we're facing, and how do we do a better job of recognizing diversity and inclusion, both in the public sector and the private sector. Many companies and many universities are attacking this issue, recognizing that we will all be better if we hire, we always need to hire the best talent, but we also need to hire a diverse array of talent. And so diversity, inclusion, and gender balance and all those things will come into that discussion. So I think a very, very timely discussion for our day. And then we kind of finish off with a couple of areas, one on in vitro breeding techniques. And then finally, we end with a rousing opportunity to highlight our award winners, our NAPB award winners from 2020. The folks at Cornell have done a great job of planning and assembling a great cast of characters and speakers for this. We all would have really loved going to Cornell for a personal visit to all of their programs. They would have had some great, field days and tours planned for us. And so that would have been a wonderful experience, but we'll still get to hear a lot of the highlights from Cornell and the various faculty members at the University of Cornell involved in breeding. And so the in vitro breeding techniques and the previous session on horticultural will be a really nice chance to feature some of the Cornell faculty.
Sounds like it's going to be a great program, Dave. How can people sign up?
And so you can either go to plantbreedingoneword.org and find our meeting drop down in there, or you can go directly to napb2021.com. And you can register right up through the day of the meeting. And if you register, everything is going to be recorded. And so if you're not able to attend during the course of that week, I know this has always been a challenge on the timing of our meetings, because for those involved in summer field crops in the Northern Hemisphere, it's tricky to plan these meeting timings because many people are still busy in the field that are plant breeders. And so, and we did this when we were doing meetings live so that we could also have the field tour experience when the local hosting university is also have their crop in the field. So in the live experience, it's been a wonderful timing and opportunity to have people together. But in the virtual experience, it's been a bit of a challenge because everybody's still busy in their own field and in their own plant breeding activities. So one of the nice features, if you register, you can catch as much of the meeting during the week as you wish. And if you want to go back, weeks later and review some of the things you weren't able to catch, everything will be recorded, so you'll be able to go back and do that.
For more great podcasts, visit seedworld.com. And again, to sign up for the NAPB virtual annual meeting, visit napb2021.com, or you can also visit plantbreeding.org and follow the links. Have a great day.